Welcome to Raw Conscious Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Cheney. Here, I dive deep into extraordinary journeys, out-of-body experiences, near-death awakenings, encounters with the paranormal, the unseen, unexplained, and deeply spiritual. You will hear from real people sharing raw, unfiltered stories. Settle in, get ready for a conversation that might shift your consciousness. Today's guest, we have Andrew Bauer. Andrew Bauer is a two-time near-death experiencer, although we will only be covering one near-death experience. And there's going to be so many subjects that we touch on at this time because he had so many downloads and so much information that came to him during his near-death experience. So we are going to try to cover as much as we can in this video, and there's definitely going to be a round two. So welcome, Andrew.
Hi, nice to see you again.
So go ahead and, yep.
Oh, okay. So basically, like you said, I had two near-death experiences. The first one happened when I was 7 from a really bad virus that affected my hometown and the surrounding area. It only affected kids under the age of 16. At the time I was 7, my brother was 4.5. It hit both of us, although my brother got the mild version, I got the severe version. Of the, I want to say 5 or 6 dozen kids that affected, probably 70% of them ended up in the hospital. It's for some length of time, at least for more than 48 hours. And then of those, I'm not sure how many ended up going into a coma because of it had like severe dehydration, high fever that ran 105 to 107, which basically means your brain is boiling inside your skull. Uh, Ended up with at the far end septicemia and septic shock. Um, uh, we got organs shut down. I got to the point where all I had left was my lungs, my heart, and my brain. And within an hour, I'd been in a coma for 4 days at that point, and within an hour, my lungs and heart shut down, and then right behind them, the brain shut down, and so I had no brain activity. Everything was flatlined, and they called the code blue team in, and I when everything was flatlined is when I left my body. And uh, I was up, like it was in the hospital room, so I was up in the corner of the room, and I could see the doctor in charge of the Code Blue team, who was standing at the foot of my bed, kind of giving orders to everybody that was on the team. And I remember seeing the angle that I could see him from was, above and behind. And I remember he had this bald spot where he had a comb over, where he combed left to right, basically to cover his bald spot. And I remember asking later on the nurse, I said, "Who is this doctor you came in my room? I didn't recognize him. I don't remember seeing him before." And she asked me to describe him, and the first thing I said was a bald spot with a comb over. And she said, "It sounds like Dr. Johnson Johansson, something like that." I don't remember the name she gave me. And she called him in, and he said, "Do I look like the man you saw?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure. Can you bend over?" And he kind of looked at me strangely, and then he bent over, and I saw the bald spot on top of his head with a comb over, and said, "Yep, that's you." So it kind of freaked the nurse out. Um, but anyway, so after I left my body, I was in a bit of a panic because I had never experienced anything like this before. I had no concept of death. I, nobody to my knowledge had ever died. Like I lost a friend when I was 12 to a drunk driver. My first family member didn't die till 1990, so I was almost 20 years old. So I had nobody that I knew who had passed away. So I knew I got no concept of what death meant. I knew that people died, but it was more of a, you know, just something I'd heard of, but I didn't know anything about. And so I had no idea what was going on with me. And I remember seeing this body on the bed, but I didn't recognize myself at first because yeah, just like didn't look like me. And I said, well, this is me up here. Like I don't understand why I'm up here, but this is me. So who's that? And that's when a voice kind of came in my head and said, you have crossed over. But you're okay. You'll be fine. Don't worry. And I couldn't see the being that was, the voice was coming from, but the voice was
Right.
very, I describe it as sing-songy, where it sounded like almost like musical, and it was very calming, um, very peaceful sounding voice, and it automatically kind of put me at ease. But after I fully coded and they were working on me, I remember hearing the doctor uh, yelling things like amphoepi, which ampule of epinephrine, which is a what do you call it, an adrenaline
It
type
jolts you.
drug.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just
Hmm.
it tries to restart your heart basically, and they're trying to get a rhythm. But I remember hearing things that I mentioned later on because I had no medical knowledge. Of course, at 7 years old, I didn't know anything about anything. Um, but anyway, um, that's when the voice said, you have something you need to do. You need to come with us. And I felt my body, or not my body, but my whatever I was at this point, go through the building, through the corner of the room, past the roof. And I remember seeing my old hometown, which was in Western Massachusetts, um, like from thousands of feet up. And at the time, I had never seen a building taller than 7 stories, which is a hotel in my old hometown. It's the only thing taller than 2 stories anywhere in the town. And uh, I think a couple years earlier, my family had taken me to New York City for the bicentennial in 1976. And I remember we went to the World Trade Center, which was almost brand new at that point. It just opened to the public like a year before. And I remember leaning my head against the glass and looking down at the traffic, 1,300 feet below me, and thinking we look like little tiny matchbox cars. Um, but that was like a one-time experience, and I'd never seen anything from this high up. Even that building, was so. It was like looking at something from this far away, then all of a sudden you're that far away, and I could see my house. I
Right.
could see the ski area that I used to go skiing at, and But anyway, I remember everything went blank for a moment, and then when I next came to, or whatever you want to call it, I was in this room, or what felt like a room. It was surrounded by these walls, and everything looked like they were made of this bluish green energy. And I remember it was very malleable because I could reach out and almost touch it, but it was like it wouldn't let my hand actually touch it. It would move away and just kind of undulate whenever you tried to touch it. And I found out later that these areas are, I call them like a room of requirement, like from Harry Potter, where these areas can take on whatever shape and purpose that they need them to, um, depending on whether they need, like a place to acclimate to the other side, or a place to have a life review, or whatever the case might be. And I remember around me was this. There were 3 beings, and only one of them spoke to me in my mind. And I learned later that this was my guide, and the other 2 were like um, interns, is the best way I can think of to describe it, where they were beings who wanted to become guides, but were learning how to do that from someone who'd already been a guide for a long period of time. And they
Right.
never spoke to me, but they would just smile or nod or whatever with him. But his voice was very clear to me. You've died and crossed over, but as you can tell, there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly fine. You're no longer sick. Um, you're in a different place now. And
Mhm.
I didn't know where this place was, but I obviously didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before, so I kind of took what he said at face value. Um, but once I acclimated to the other side, they told me that there's something you need to do. It's called the life review, and it's something that all beings go through when they come to the other side. And they led me to a different place where there were these pods. Best I can describe them. They look like these really long, almost like lounge chair with a cover on it. If you can think of it like that, where the cover would slide up over you when you lay down in it, and it would basically totally immerse you in this experience where you got no outside, um, no sounds, no sights, just everything was the experience. And these things telepathically read your energy signature, which every being has a unique one. There's nothing. It's like a fingerprint, but it's more unique even than that. And with that energy signature is attached every single lifetime you've ever lived, are living, or will ever live. So by doing that, all it needs is what lifetime you want to see. And most people, that's the one you're currently living or the one you just left. So,
Right, right.
and what it does is it shows you, yes, it shows you like basically uh, what not only what you said and did during your life, but it shows you from your perspective, but also the other people's perspective. Like if you do something bad or do something good, it shows you how they were affected by what you did and said. And so it gives you that
Hmm.
different perspective that we don't have normally, where you get to see the consequences of your actions, the long-term ramifications. Like if you, let's say, you buy someone their groceries one day, and you see that they don't have money to buy groceries, and you buy their groceries. Well, maybe that means they can pay their rent that month. They don't get kicked out of their apartment. Their kids have a place to sleep. They do better in school. Maybe the parents use that as a teaching moment, treat other people with kindness. The kids go on to treat other people better, and then the people that they
Right.
treat other people better. And so there's this long chain of events that come out of this one little thing that you might think is, minor, or, you might not even think twice about it, but it affects so many other people down the line, and we don't see that except in that life review. And it's amazing to see. Um,
Right.
I mean, there's times where, if you do bad things, obviously you're going to feel the ramifications of that. Um, but at the same time, when you're young like I was, I hadn't really done anything bad except for, steal a little Matchbox car from my cousin once. That, you don't do a whole lot of bad stuff at 7. But yeah,
Well,
yeah, after
tell
that,
the
I
experience about
came
the
out.
Matchbox.
Oh, oh, right. I wanted. So basically, my cousin, who was like 6 months older than me, um, he and his family were really close with us. It was my father's younger brother, and so his son was born right before I was, and he had this Matchbox car that his father had bought him that was an exact duplicate, color and everything, for the car that his father had at that particular time. It was like a Pontiac Grand Am or something like that. I don't remember what car it was, and so this was like his most cherished toy. And so one day I happened to be at his house and I saw it and I thought it was cool. And I love Matchbox cars. I collected them back then. So I just took it home with me, not thinking twice about it. But what I saw in my life view was that how it affected him. Like he was crying to his mom, "Where's my car? I can't find my car," and couldn't sleep for 2 days and was crying and inconsolable. And it it really changed for me how, like, the way I saw what I did. Like for me, it was nothing to do this, but for him, it was everything.
Right.
And it shows you just how. how little thing what might be small to you might not be so small to someone else. And like
Mhm.
the first thing I wanted to do when I got back was give him that Matchbox car back, and I did. And he didn't blame me or anything. He didn't get angry. Neither did his father. It was just he was so glad to have his car back. He actually hugged me, and it made me feel good
Aw.
to return it back to him. And it was it brought us closer actually in a way. And but I felt like I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to take your car. And I didn't know how much you loved this car. And uh so like it was a teaching moment for me. Um but just to see how much it affected him, both on the other side and in real life, it changed everything for me from that point forward. Like how I would see other people and what their stuff was like.
Right.
So
Mhm.
so
So before you go on, hold what you have in your head. I have to ask you a question because I've heard this from multiple people that have had NDEs, even the most recent interview that I did. When you left the hospital and you went through the walls and then you went through the ceiling or however it went, do you remember feeling the the texture as you went through of the walls of the ceiling?
I don't remember feeling it then. I think I felt it more in my second one because I was in an ambulance, and I think
Okay.
I was more paying attention to that. I was so
Right.
freaked out by what was going on that I didn't really pay attention to that tiny detail at that point.
Mhm.
I mean, at 7, I wasn't really
Right. I just wanted
wasn't
to,
that
yeah,
detail conscious at that point.
right. I
Yeah, I mean,
was
I think
just
I think it was
interested
more
in
detail conscious. Like
knowing.
yeah, like the second time around, I was more like I knew what was going to happen, and I wasn't freaked out. I knew what death was, so I had a lot more knowledge at that point than I did during the first one, and so I paid more attention to the little details that time around, and so I felt and
Right.
experienced more that time than I did the first time.
Mhm.
But yeah, the first time you have one, it's especially at that age. I mean, it's disconcerting. But at the same time, once you get used to being on the other side, it's the most amazing thing. I describe to people like going to have a near death experience and then coming back is like going to Disney World or the most beautiful tropical island you can imagine, and then getting dumped back in a sewer. It's that
Right.
radical a difference. And um like there's a reason why nobody who has one of these experiences wants to come back. you know,
Mhm.
and uh, most of us either have to be forced to come back or convinced to come back. There's something where we it's usually because we have something we need to do, and to not stay and do that would affect too many other people. But yeah,
Right.
it take a lot of convincing to get me to return both times. Um,
Right.
because it's so beautiful there, and uh, the sounds are like it's not like anything you can experience here. It's sounds are more crisp. They're the colors are more vivid. Colors have sounds to
Right.
them, like a specific wavelength. And so we like
Mhm.
I'll just as an example, after my life review, I found myself in this place that turned out later to be somewhere that I knew from my past, but I didn't know that then. Um, but uh, it was in this field of wildflowers. They were all different colors: purple, blue, yellow, pink, orange, you name it. It was every color was there, and the colors each having their own frequency, their own wavelength. It sounded like a heavenly chorus, and I don't know how else to describe it. I've never
Wow.
found a sound or combination of sounds that sound anything like it. And it's like you could lay there and just close your eyes and stay there all day long, and uh, just never want to leave. So, um, but anyway, so I found myself in this place. It was like I said, like a bunch of wildflowers, and
So
it
now
was like
this
a
place that you're at, that was after you left from your or you did the life review and then
my
you
life review.
exited from there
Yeah,
and
it's like
went
they
into
basically told me
another.
you can go look around and do what you want to do. Um, the main thing is the life review is something every being has to go through because you have to see like how your lifetime went according because everyone comes into their life with a specific path that they want to follow, things that they want to do, things
Right.
that they want to experience, people that they want to have come in and out of their life for whatever reasons. And so, how closely we follow that path determines how our life goes. So, um, so if you, let's say, you're supposed to be a good and helpful person, you're supposed to be a healer, and you don't follow your path really well, you could end up being very harmful because of that. And
Hmm.
that's something I actually did once a couple lifetimes ago. And um, so it's it's to show you not only how what you do affects other beings, but also like where you deviated from the path that you meant to be on, so that okay, maybe next time around I need to do something a little bit differently so that I can stay on my path closer than I did this time around. Or, conversely, maybe
Right.
I did really well and stayed on the path really well one time and, had a perfect life, which that also happened to me. So I had two
Hmm.
consecutive lives, one that was perfect, one that was absolutely not perfect. And
Hmm.
so I got to experience both of those.
Wow.
Um, but basically, they just told me I could look around and see what I wanted to see. And I remember whenever I transitioned from one place to another, I would just close my eyes for a second and open them, and I was somewhere else. And I didn't realize that
Hmm.
I was unconsciously transporting myself where I wanted to be. It
Hmm.
became more of a conscious thing in my second near-death experience because I knew what I was trying to do. But
So
the first time was
so
more unconscious.
let me ask you a question. So did you have a physical body when you had your near death experience? In
No,
your experience, did, okay.
yeah, it wasn't a physical body. It was what I call. They tend to refer to it the same way. If you watch the Matrix movie, the first one, they call it the residual self-image. It's the way we see ourselves, but the perfected version. Like if you were
Hmm.
sick and emaciated, you would be at full health. If you were old, you might be at your best age, like say your 20s or your 30s. Um, if you were in a wheelchair, you'd be fully ambulatory. And so it's
Right.
the perfect version of whatever you see in your head as yourself. So
Hmm.
that's what you become. And we only usually hold on to that for a certain length of time, unless we're greeting someone during a near death experience or after they passed on. Like you hear people talk about seeing their dead relatives. They can see
Hmm.
them as their relatives because they took on this residual self image while they're greeting their loved ones. But normally
Right.
we don't um, we don't hold on to that image for very long after we cross over because every lifetime is a different body. And sometimes you're even on a
Hmm.
different planet, so you're not always on Earth, um, or whatever planet you happen to be incarnating on. So what
Right.
you look like in a certain life, you're not going to look like. You might be a male one life, female the next. You might live to be an old person, then you might die young. You might be sick, you might be healthy. So there's a 1,000 different iterations of how you can look even on the same planet, and to hold on to one image versus all the rest is kind of pointless because you're not that it's just a suit you put on for that one lifetime. It's like if you want to go
Right.
under the water, you put on a scuba diving suit and tanks and a little mouthpiece. But when you come out of the water, you take that stuff off. You don't just go walking around in that suit for the rest of eternity. If you go into space, you put on a
Right.
spacesuit long enough to go outside, and you come back in the airlock, you take it off. It's the same idea. When you leave this life, you take that body off because it's no longer you. That's not the you that's continuing on. But we hold on to a residual self-image for a certain length of time. Some beings hold on to it longer than others. It just depends on your mindset. You can hold on to it as long as you want. It doesn't affect anything. But generally, we're kind of, I don't want to say encouraged, or we're definitely not forced to, but we're kind of encouraged to let that go because that's not us. The us is the being, the energy-based being that's inside that body, that's manipulating
Right.
that body,
Right.
that's using that body to live in, and access this universe. So yeah, so we don't have like our normal form is an energy-based form. It's very malleable. It's it looks like an amorphous blob of light that has like a beautiful pure white light at the core, like right around where your heart or your center mass would be.
Hmm.
And then most of it is bluish green, kind of like that energy in the walls I was talking about earlier. Blue
Hmm.
green is a very common color on the other side. Like not only beings, but um, the structures, or whatever you want to call it. It's like blue green is a very common color, and it's the beings are they're malleable, so you can it can change shape into whatever it wants to be. You're not held to one
Right.
shape like we are when we're in a body. Um, and you can literally
Hmm.
become anything you want. I mean, you can look like Elvis if you want. You can look like your favorite rock star. You can look like an alien you saw in a movie once. You can look like whatever you want, and you can do
Hmm.
whatever you want. That's the great thing. Um, you're not limited like we are here. You can there's like the things that the laws of the physical universe don't apply. Time doesn't work the same way there. Like I was dead for 6.5 minutes the first time, 7.5 minutes the second time, but I experienced in total over 11 years on the other side. A year out the first time and over a
Right.
decade the second time. Um, you gravity doesn't exist. You can fly, you can run as fast as you want. It's like if you ever see What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, where he's like running really
Hmm.
fast across the field in the other
Yes.
side. It's like that. You can do whatever you want because
Hmm.
nothing can hurt you. You're not a physical being anymore. um
Hmm.
so
So
like you can
what? So
fly, you
what
can
were
go
some
into
of the
oh,
places? What were some of the places that you ventured out to as a 7-year old?
okay, so like I said, when I first came out of the life review, the first place I went to was more of an automatic thing for me. It was like something in me wanted to go to this place, and because I went there both times, I had a near-death experience right after my life review, and it was a mountainous region. I was in a field of flowers. There was a really old log cabin in front of me. To my right was like the mountain would slope up and then ended in like a rock face, and then it continued on beyond that. Below me was a really deep mountain valley. There was another line of mountains on the other side of that valley, and so both lines of mountains basically converged in the distance and almost met the ground. And right about where they met in the distance, about 2 miles, 3 miles away, was this one mountain right in the middle that I remember it was shaped kind of like a pyramid, had four distinct sides to it, but instead of meeting
Hmm.
at a sharp tip like they normally would on a pyramid, it was slanted to one side. And I remember that was very kind of different looking. And when I came back, I kept drawing this mountain over and over again. And my grandmother, when I was at her house one time, saw that and she recognized the mountain, but she wasn't sure what it was. Um, but what she did is she at back, this is back before the internet or Google or anything like that. We didn't have search engines, so we had Encyclopedia Britannica and a library card, and that was all we
Right.
had. So yeah, so it was like she grabbed her Encyclopedia Britannica. She knew it was something in Europe, but she wasn't sure where. And she kept flipping through the pages really fast, trying to find it. And eventually she found a picture and she brought it back. Now, what I'm telling you now is the description she gave me later on because I don't remember any of this. Um, she brought the book, laid it in front of me, and she said, I pointed to it, said, "That's it, that's my mountain." And it was the Matterhorn in Switzerland, in the Zermatt
Wow.
region of Switzerland, southwest Switzerland. And
Wow.
I had created from some deep set memory this whole scene where everything was completely within my control. I could control how fast the sun moved. I could control whether it was day or night. Um, if there's stars in the sky, they were three dimensional. I could reach out and grab them like a ball like a glowing ball of light, and I could, throw them around and play with them. It was like the greatest playground on earth. It was like being in a
Wow.
ball pit the size of a country. And but this it turned out this place was somewhere that I lived in my first lifetime on Earth 3 lifetimes ago, and I found this out later on. Um,
Right.
but it was because it was my version of a perfect life and a perfect place where everything was ideal. My my soul, my my being held on to that memory, held on to that vision, and every time I go back to the other side, I'm automatically in that place. It's like my home for me,
Right.
more than anywhere I've ever lived. I always felt like no matter where I live, I feel like I don't belong there. I feel like I belong somewhere else.
I know that
But
feeling oh so well.
yeah, I mean,
So
it's
now,
it's
was there
it's hard to be
any
torn.
other adventures that you took at the at that
Hmm.
time
Yep.
at
I
7 years old? So
I
tell me
remember.
some more of your adventures you took while you were on the other side.
Yeah. So basically, while I was in this field and I just kind of was laying back and enjoying the view and the sound and everything else, I remember I finally got to the point I let the sun set and the stars came out and it was like I said, it was all three dimensional. It wasn't like the tiny little dots of light. It was two dimensional like we see them here on Earth. It felt like everything was three dimensional, like you could reach out and touch stuff. And I remember thinking that I wish I could be out where they are. And the next thing I know, I was out there. I was out in space above the Earth. And
Wow.
I remember looking back at it like I was out like where the space station is or somewhere in that range. And I could see like the Terminator between day and night. And uh there was no like I was used to lines, like maps with like every country's a different color and there's a line between them. It's nothing like that. It's all this blue, green, and brown glowing ball of life that is amazing to behold. It was like this. It opened my eyes to this whole other universe that I had never seen, never imagined seeing. Like I had never seen anything outside of my hometown except New York City one time at the age of 5. I had never seen space. Stars were just points of light to me. I had no idea all this was out there. And when I looked down at the earth, I remember thinking everything, it's just this one world that all of us share. And it's, there's no lines, there's no separation. It's just one. And
Hmm.
I remember thinking, like, it's the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. And I remember I went to I'd heard of other planets at that point. It was still early on, but I remember I'd heard about like Mars and Jupiter, and I knew there were others, but I didn't know their names. And as I thought about them, I was there. And I think probably the most amazing one
Wow.
I saw was Saturn, the giant rings. Yeah, like I remember I was like flying just above them, flying around the rings, and looking down at this kind of like golden yellow planet um, of gas below that, and Jupiter with all this multicolored clouds and the giant red spot that's 3 times the size of Earth. Um, I could actually go down into the clouds and fly through them, fly through the great red spot, come back out. I visited all the moons. it was, I mean,
Wow.
I can't describe how different all this was. I mean, you're talking to a kid who, for excitement for me was going to the arcade in the afternoon on the way home from school, and all of a sudden here I
Right.
am flying around different planets. Like, holy cow! Like, I couldn't imagine ever being anywhere else. Like, how did I not know this? How did I not know about all these places? And
Right.
when I came back, I was so obsessed with space, and to this day, I'm still obsessed with it. Where astronomy, astrophysics are they're not a thing I love to learn about. They're an obsession for me. And I love everything to do with space. Here I am like 47 years later and I'm still like a little kid on Christmas morning. And it's the most amazing feeling being out there and just flying through this stuff like Superman. Like I remember reading comic books as a kid,
Right.
and
Right.
Superman was through flying through the sky, and here I am flying through space like Superman, and I'm like it's like wow, like holy cow, how did they not know? Like, how do you come back from that? You know, how do you come back from
Right.
this, from that? And like
Right.
I remember, I could while I was out there, I can remember my grandmother was the one that was with me most of the time in the hospital because my parents had to be working or at home with my brother who was sick at home. And so I remember while the doctors and the team were working on me, she had been shuffled out into the hall and was watching through the little rectangular window in the door. And I could feel her thinking, I hope he doesn't die. Please don't let him die. And the thoughts of her kind of sobered me up, like being drunk and then all of a sudden getting a cold splash of water in the face. And I immediately went right back to her, and I was right next to her in the hallway, looking in at me getting worked on the bed. And I remember hearing the voice again of my guide, um, and he told me, "Yeah, it's time for you to go back." And I remember saying, "Do I have to? Like, can't I stay here? It's
Mhm.
so beautiful here. Why do I have to go back?" And he said, "No, you can't stay. It's not your time yet. You have things you need to do." And they had already
Mhm.
told me um, between, after the life review before I went to Switzerland, of a series of events that would be coming in my own life, which have all since come to pass except one. And so, I had that kind of as that's why I didn't want to come back because I knew that I was facing a lot of pain and suffering, and I didn't know one thing I didn't know was why, and I found
Right.
that out later on. But yeah, so um, as soon as he said, you have to go back, I immediately was back in the corner of the room, and then right back in my body, and I was still in a coma. I would be in a coma for the next seven
Mhm.
days before I finally came back fully.
Mhm.
But when I came back, it was the light was painful. Sounds were painful. It was like I describe it like Robin Williams as a genie in Aladdin. This phenomenal cosmic power, EDP living space. That's how the body feels when you come back. It's like this little tiny box that you have to cram all of this massive, beautiful, amazing parts of you into. And it's
Mhm.
so restricting, it's so limiting. Um, like that's why
Mhm.
we don't sense things the way we do on the other side because everything has to come through that filter, through the body filter. And so we're getting a very watered down version of everything that we feel and experience on the other side. That on the other side is
Wow,
pure.
that was an excellent way how to describe that. That was what a excellent way to describe that with coming back in. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's painful to come back. It's like I said, the lights and sounds, everything hurt. It wasn't just my like a
Mhm.
normal pain. It was like um, like everything was an assault on my senses. It took me
Mhm.
like I remember like the second time that I came back, it took me a month just to relearn how to speak because I was so used to telepathic communication and everything being automatic
Mhm.
that I didn't know how to adjust back. And I had 10 years of memories crammed into my head and nothing to
Mhm.
like no framework to reference this with. And so getting used to
Right.
that again, being used to being in the body, having to do everything, manually, you have to
Mhm.
do everything was so difficult. Like even the first time I was
Right.
really just out of it. I didn't speak for most of a month. The first time even. I was out of school for several months. I had to be homeschooled. I I couldn't handle being back. It was depressing.
Mhm.
I can't think of any other word to describe it. In that moment, I can't recall ever being more depressed. I mean, I've been more depressed since then, but nothing like that. I never felt
Mhm.
anything like that where I just, why am I back here? Why do I have
Mhm.
to be here? Once you see that
Right.
other side, there's nothing to compare it.
So now, when you after your experience, you went through a period of time where you weren't speaking, the first experience and the second one, but in the first one, when did or did you speak to your family about it? Was it something that you spoke to your family about, or did you not know how to even word it, being so young?
Uh, it took me a while to kind of put my thoughts in order. I wasn't
Mhm.
sure what to tell them. Like I said, the first time I experienced about a year's worth of time on the other side, even though for them it had only been
Mhm.
a few minutes. Uh,
Mhm.
my I think my grandmother automatically accepted everything that I said because she. Well, I'll get to her later. We kind of got to her before as far as that goes. Like why she believed me right off the bat. My family didn't. My like kids at school didn't. Teachers didn't. People at the church I was going to at the time didn't. Everybody thought I was making it
So
up
you
or
were
your
trying to speak
imagination.
about it. It
Oh
just
yeah,
wasn't.
I felt compelled to speak. Like I had to
Right.
tell somebody. Like there's this amazing thing out there, and I can't not talk about it. It's like I gotta say something. I gotta tell somebody, and
Mhm.
nobody would believe me. And it was the most frustrating thing in my, especially at 7. Like
Mhm.
you don't have words to to describe things on a normal basis, even if you don't have a near-death experience. And then you add that on
Mhm.
top of it, it's like 100 times worse. And
Right.
I didn't have the words to describe what I was feeling, what I had experienced, what I'd seen. And,
Mhm.
and like I said, every time I tried to speak, everyone was like, it's just your imagination. You're making it up. You're trying to get attention. It was always some excuse that they would come up with.
Right.
At, at first, I didn't know what to believe. I didn't have anything to compare this to. I had nobody
Mhm.
else like, to who I could say, "Hey, you've experienced this, I've experienced this, let's compare notes." There was nothing like that then.
Mhm.
It was I got into my 20s before I met another person who'd had a near death experience in person. So I went
Mhm.
for, most of 2 decades with just
Right.
fighting this on my own. And it was the
So,
hardest time of my life.
right. So now, you had mentioned earlier in the conversation that you remembered uh lifetimes that you had had before. Was that after this NDE or after the second NDE?
No, the second one. Yeah,
It was
because
after the second
the
one.
second one is when, yeah, 'cause that's when I had I had gone, I had come back to the other side during the second one, and at that point I'd already gone through a lot of the things that I've been told were coming in the first near death experience, the bullying, the brain injuries, the back injury, all the stuff that I'd been told
Right.
had been happening for the last 7 years at that
Mhm.
point. And
Mhm.
I didn't know the only question in my mind was why? Why am I going through all this? Why am I suffering like this? Why is it hurt? Why do I have to be in so much pain all the time?
Mhm.
And
Right.
my guide had asked me, he looked, he kind of looked at me and, got down on my level. And he says, if you really want to know, we can show you, but it's not going to be a pleasant experience for you. And
Mhm.
I should have listened to
Mhm.
him, I think, but I felt like this need to know why, like not knowing why, even in regular life, is like the most difficult thing. Like when you don't know why
Mhm.
something really major is happening, it's the most
Right.
frustrating thing for you as a human being. So I needed to
Mhm.
know, and so they gave me a separate life review where I was shown the last 3 lifetimes before this, basically all the lifetimes I've lived on Earth up to this point.
Mhm.
And like the first one I said was like the first was a perfect life, the one in Switzerland, and I had lived like
Mhm.
not only according to my path, I'd actually gone above and beyond in that lifetime. It was the best life I could imagine having. The second one, I did the exact opposite. I not only didn't follow my path, I let ego and greed lead me in a completely different direction. I instead of being helpful to hundreds of people, I harmed hundreds of people, and not just
Mhm.
adults, but children, families, and I ruined so many lives. Um,
Mhm.
and to see and feel that, um, not only, especially like because you could see I could see the faces of every person that I hurt. And the kids were the worst
Mhm.
because like there were just like kids on the street who were freezing in the winter, who were frying in the summer, who were starving, begging for any scrap of food somebody could give them, begging for money, begging for anything that someone would give them, and
Mhm.
just dying, never knowing. You're like, what did I do wrong? Was it like the most common question I remember kids thinking,
Right.
and knowing that they did nothing wrong, that I did something wrong. And because I did something wrong, they were made to suffer. And
Mhm.
that that vision broke me in ways that I cannot to this day still describe. Um, I remember screaming like, "Please, I cannot take this. I don't want to see this. Let me out." And I remember sitting here in my guide's voice again. You asked for this. You wanted to see this. That's what this is the something we cannot stop. You have to go through all. You have to go all the way through. And
Mhm.
by the time I was finished, like there was another life in there where I wasted a life, thinking I could make up for what I'd done in the previous one by just ending it early, by getting Spanish flu and dying at the age of 17, almost 18. But
Mhm.
instead, I just wasted a life completely. I My guide said basically you might as well never it might as well never have existed at all, for it had no impact at all on anybody, at least of all on you. He said you accomplished
Mhm.
nothing, you did nothing for anyone else. And that's when
Right.
I made a decision I had to come back for this life. And he told me that the only way you can make up for this is to live a life of what's called atonement. And
Mhm.
that means not only you have to experience the level of pain and suffering that you once inflicted on others, but you can't, it's not just going through that, because if you just go through pain, a lot of times people turn pain into making others suffer pain. Misery
Right.
loves company and all that. But you have to convert that pain and suffering into sympathy, empathy, and compassion for other beings. And so
Mhm.
it's a mix of those two things. It's not just making up for what you did. It's um it's it's suffering but for a purpose. And that's one thing like
Right.
a lot of times
Right.
people don't understand. They think it's punishment. It's not punishment. No one's punishing you, no one's judging you. The only one to judge you is you. Um but they see this as like, if you're experiencing pain, it must be punishment from some capricious being, out there who hates your guts and wants you to suffer for the rest of eternity. It's not the case. It's just our soul. When you do something this bad, your soul feels completely out of balance, and it cries out, "Please fix this. Make this right." And it will not let you alone until you fix it. So for me, it was a compulsion. I had to do this, and as bad as things have been sometimes in this life, knowing what I know now as far as why I'm
Mm-hmm.
going through that, why I'm suffering, why I'm in pain, it makes it easier to accept and to deal with, because I know that there's a reason behind it. And that
Mm-hmm.
was all I wanted, was the why. I got the why. It wasn't maybe the why that I wanted, but I got my reason. And so that's given me a purpose in this life.
Wow, that is
So,
powerful what you just said. Extremely powerful.
no,
So,
yeah, like it's led my whole life since then.
right. So now gosh, I'd so love to go at this point right into your second near-death experience, because you've kind of told some things already in it, but I know that
Yeah,
it's gonna be pretty detailed. So let's not go in that direction. But
yeah, yeah. That one, like I said, that would fill up a bookcase if I wrote it in book form. There's that
right.
much stuff
So
involved.
gosh, I don't know what direction to go right now, because I know we can't do the whole other near-death experience. Is there something that you can think of right now that you think would be very important for this interview, for the guests to know?
Well, I could, do you want me to talk about like where like the near-death experiences led me to go, as far as like what I did afterwards, maybe, because that's a little easier to explain, I think.
Yes, let's go into that. I know what you're talking about. Yep, let's go into that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So once I had my first experience, it changed me a little bit, but the second one is one I think that had the greatest effect on me, not just because it was longer and because it was more involved and a lot more. I brought back everything that I experienced and knew and learned there. Yeah, but it
Mm-hmm.
was more about because I had a purpose at that point. Um, I was no longer like I had been wandering and feeling lost. Like I didn't know, what am I meant to do? Why am I here? And that's something that I think every human being searches for. We spend our whole lives trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what do we want to do with this life while we're here. And I had this purpose. What do I do with it? And so starting in 1994, so we're talking about, I was 23 at that point. I started
Mm-hmm.
traveling around. I met people through church groups that I was in, or social groups that I was in, and they would tell people that they knew elsewhere, hey, got a guy who's had these experiences, and he'd love to come talk to you if you'd like to have him. And like
Mm-hmm.
I would either go to a church, or I'd go to like a bookstore, talk to groups anywhere from 6 to 12 people, sometimes 20 or 30. And then from that, I got into panel discussions where they would have like, say, a neurosurgeon or a neurologist. They'd have a regular, like an ER doctor. They'd have a theologian, an atheist. They'd have a mix of people who could give different perspectives on the same subjects, which are usually either
Mm-hmm.
afterlife, death, or near-death experiences. And so
Mm-hmm.
I kind of gave the near-death experience perspective of that. So I spent the
So
next
what was it
22
more of
years
like
doing that.
right? Was it more in those panel discussions that you're speaking about with everybody that was there? Was it more of like they were studying it, or were they debating it?
More debating. Some of them were just talking about like, what's the religion's view on this? the scientific view on this? What's the medical
Mhm.
view on this? So it was partially a debate, but partially just getting a different, multiple perspectives on different subjects that people don't necessarily understand, like death and the afterlife. What happens to us when we die? And it's been something that's been,
Right.
I think, a subject of interest for many, many decades. And it's
Mhm.
become even more so now that we have the ability to connect across the world where we didn't
Right.
have when I was growing up. Like,
And
I
that
can
was
reach
back in
more people through a podcast.
1998.
94 is when I started traveling around,
Wow.
and I did that for the next 22 years. So 2016 was when I did my last panel discussion. That was like fall 2016. So 22 years that I traveled
Wow.
all from Western Pennsylvania all the way to Northern Alabama and everything in between.
Right. Yeah. So back in
So
1994, that wasn't even really something that they discussed very much at that time. So I'm
uh,
surprised that there were
it was more,
like
it
so
was
many
discussed,
people
but
behind the
there wasn't the
scenes.
resources. Yeah, there wasn't the resources we have now, but it was still a subject of interest. Like people, like what happens to us when we die has been a part of the human condition since we've been on Earth. So that's nothing
Hmm.
new. When you're like, what
Hmm.
happens? Like death is the ultimate unknown, and it's the one that
Hmm.
everybody fears at some point or another in their life or their whole life. Um, because we fear what
Right.
we don't understand, and we don't understand death more than anything. So
Hmm.
these panel discussions were trying to give, a multitude of perspectives on the things that we don't understand, maybe give people something to latch onto, or something more to think about. And so the panel discussions for me were the most fun, not just because of getting different perspectives, but also there was a lot more people involved in the audience, and they would ask audience questions, and then I had people come up after the show, and that's when I first met, my first near-death experiencer besides myself, um, was
Hmm.
people coming up to me after the show to tell me about their experiences, who felt like me, like they were alone and cut off from everyone in their lives. No one believed them any more than they believed me. And so it was that strength
Hmm.
in numbers and having someone else who understood without having to have it explained to them was an amazing feeling, and it drove me to want to do this more. And so, like I said, I did this for 22 years, where I traveled all over the place, and the more I traveled, the more I wanted to travel. And
Right.
so it became almost like a little bit of an obsession.
So how did the churches how did the churches receive your experience?
Some better than others, depending on how open their minds were. There was some churches that were more, what they call open religion or free religion churches, where there was no specific doctrine per se. And then there
Hmm.
were others, especially once you got south of the Mason-Dixon line, that were more traditionalist and closed-minded. In fact, I remember several events, like especially a couple in Charlottesville, Virginia, that I went to, where in fact, there was one, had the self-proclaimed preacher who was on the panel, and what we didn't
Hmm.
know is he'd brought along about a dozen of his more vocal followers in the audience, and every time one of the rest of us got up to speak, uh, they would basically try to shout over us and denounce us, and you're going to hell, and you're all from the devil, and it was one thing after the
Wow.
other. So they eventually had to toss him out. but but thankfully they were I won't say they're exception. I mean, there was a lot of people like that, especially like I said in the South and the Midwest. There was a lot like that, especially in those days. But there was more, especially as we got further along and the internet came along, and
Hmm.
people had more access to information. We noticed there was less and less of that and more of the open-minded people. And I was so glad to see that
Hmm.
happen in real, like in real time, because Like I
Right.
remember when we didn't have access to that information, when we didn't have a single book or a person to talk to. It was just us against the world. And now it's like we're
Right.
this connected community across the world that I'm in a group
Mhm.
on Facebook that has over 250,000 members. We're the largest near-death experience group in the world on Facebook.
Mhm.
So um,
Right.
things like that have really helped to connect people and allow people to know that they're not alone, that they can talk about this and not be judged as you know like you're out for attention like we used to get like when I was a kid. So it's so much
Right.
different now. Like I'm so glad for people nowadays who have that information and the access to stuff that we didn't have because they get to have a
Right.
different experience of their near-death experiences than I did.
Yeah, it is definitely so wonderful that people can openly speak the way that we can, now than how it was before. And it is worldwide. You're exactly right. It's worldwide. And this
Yeah,
is
the conversation
definitely
you and I are
something that
having
is
right now.
rising. Mhm.
Yeah, like like I said, the conversation we're having right now, we 20 years ago we couldn't
Mhm.
have this conversation because
Couldn't
the
have it.
internet didn't
Exactly.
barely existed, and
Mhm.
there was no there was no video conferencing and
Right.
things like that. And so um,
Mhm.
it's just changed. Like I said, I can reach. I remember saying this to several people since this happened, but like I can reach more people through a single podcast interview online
Mhm.
than I reached in all the panels and all the talks that I gave for 22 years in person because I was
Right.
limited to the audience that happened to show up. Now I can, I get messages and comments from people in all corners of the world, and it's so massively different. Like, compared to the way it was then versus how it is now, it's a world of difference,
Mhm.
and I'm so glad to see it too. It's amazing the
Yes,
way
me
we can do
too.
things now.
Mhm. So, Andrew, why don't we go ahead and wrap this one up? Because I know
All
the
right.
next NDE, when we come on for round 2, the next NDE is going to be pretty detailed, and there's so much more in that NDE, and I'm really excited to be able to share
Yeah.
this with the audience and be part of that, which helps get your message out because it's so important and it's so powerful, and it's what is raising the vibration and help are facilitating the shift that's happening. So
Yeah. A shift in
let's go ahead
consciousness
and
is the
close
most
out
important
then.
thing. Yep.
Yes, it is. So we'll
And
go
like I
ahead and
said,
close out
whenever you're
now.
ready to
And
have me back, I'm always available.
I know. So, okay, so we'll go ahead and do the closing speech. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Your words of encouragement mean a lot, not just to me, but especially to the guests who come on and they share their very deeply personal experiences. These are real people and they do read the comments. And the
Hmm.
best way to support the podcast, like if you liked it, subscribe so that you can get all the new videos that come out, and please share if you feel led to share. Until next time, stay curious and stay conscious. Bye, Andrew.
Take care, Tammy. Thank you for having me.